Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of The Dive. I am Kobe, Azael is here, and Mark has joined us. We're going to return to a bit of our old format with the three-man for the whole time.
You could do a better woohoo than that.
Dave told me to do a woo to start the show off, so I'm just going to lean back so I'm playing. Where's that?
Woo!
Okay, that was good.
I'm glad you moved away from the mic a bit for that one.
I don't know how it came through, but
No, all I can think of is the chocolate rain. I move away from the mic to breathe.
oh, the little subtitle.
Yeah. All right, well, off the bat, we're going to hit up some global news. SKT rebranding. SK Telecom has combined forces with Comcast as well, and they are going to be doing a joint venture in esports. It's going to include SKT1 team, now going to be called just T1, as well as people in some Apex Legends and some other games presumably as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the most iconic League of Legends brand now changing to T1.
It's pretty funny, and I feel like especially for a North American audience, people are going to have a very, very big reaction to this. They're changing it to T1 Entertainment and Sports, by the way. And I know a certain Tyler that might...
That just sounds like his own company. Like Tyler One made this company.
Yeah.
Like Travis Gafford Industries, Tyler One Entertainment and whatever.
Entertainment and Sports.
It's also weird because everyone always called them SKT. No one ever called them T1.
Yeah.
So it's not even like you're retaining the important part.
It's definitely going to feel weird, especially because this year is the year where I was like, well, SKT are back. They're coming back to Worlds. Faker's coming back with a new team. They're going strong again. And, now even if they do get to Worlds, past Griffin and all these other younger teams in the LCK.
All these young upstarts.
Or more likely with them. It's going to be T1 Entertainment instead of SKT. It's just not going to be.
But they're going to have different logos and everything then, because SKT was like in the emblem.
Yeah.
And everything.
But they couldn't be called SKT because SK Telecom is a company and they're combining with another company. So they wouldn't want to just be like, oh yeah, you just use your name, right? So T1 is Telecom One, I guess, because it's two telecom companies kind of combining.
I don't know. It just seems weird that there's like skins in game, SKT Faker skin or something.
Yeah.
And it's like SKT's gone. Do you change the skin?
People change, teams change.
It does feel a bit like the Yankees. If the Yankees are just like, nope, we're the Black Sox now, or just you're just like, wait, what's happening here?
Yeah, I don't know what you would do, because if the company's gone and merged, can't you just like be like, all right, well, this thing will just stay the same for branding reasons? Couldn't you just do that?
Yeah, I guess they could.
Yeah. I think our next biggest topic for global news has nothing to do with competitive, by the way. It's just been everybody talking about ranked solo queue right now. And what has happened to my dear solo queue, Azael?
I don't know, man.
Because it feels a bit off.
There's definitely a lot of talk about it. I know people, especially I think, people in Masters and whatnot seem to be pretty unhappy about it. There's essentially new rank distribution, right? It used to be that it was something like 75% of players were silver and below or whatever. And Diamond as a whole was something like 2%. I think Diamond 2 was something like 0.2%, right? So it's the distributions have changed and what the ranks mean now has changed, and I think that's part of it. But obviously there's some matchmaking issues and there was some bugs, I think, with some of the MMR and things like that at the start of the season. But one of the things I think that people are going to have to get used to is the fact that old Diamond 2, I believe, is now similar percentages to what Masters is, right? Like even like a decent level Masters. So the ranks don't mean the same things anymore, which I think is causing some of the frustration. But there's also just some weird stuff. Like on one of my accounts, last time I played solo queue on it finished in Diamond and solo queue. I did my first placement game put me in silver, but I'm still playing against people who are high plat. So it was like I'm 3 full leagues below where my MMR is. And so for me, that just was like, well, I don't really want to grind that back up. I guess I just won't play that account anymore. And that's, a pretty big bummer.
Yeah, the biggest complaints I've been seeing is from the very high rated people, Elo as the guy's name is. And this only really did affect, like you're saying, very small percentage of people like Masters and Challenger people. But at the beginning of the season, a lot of, if people played a bunch at the beginning of the season and they were previously like pure Diamond players, a lot of them got extra rating or higher ranks than ever before.
MR was super inflated at the start.
And so what everyone's complaining about is now everybody at the top kind of has to wait for these people to lose out.
Yeah.
And so the system will correct, but you kind of have to go through the painful games of like playing and having them lose out.
Especially if you only play decay games, right? You can make it last a while. You know, if these people are spamming games, if I'm a Diamond 5 player or whatever, and somehow my MMR was messed up and I made it into Masters, I will lose the vast majority of my games. But if I only ever play my decay games, then you can make it take a while at least, and you're kind of staying up in that MMR. So I do think it'll correct, but certainly it's frustrating, and people seem to be a bit frustrated with positional queue as well.
Yeah, that's where I've seen a lot of complaints too. Is just like the amount of games it takes to get put in your ranking, and then how long it takes to get to where you think your MMR is for a lot of players. Like the high elo stuff is not like the average player's concern, but the overall changes to like number of games being played to like grind feels exorbitant.
Yeah. I think it would be cool for a positional queue. I mean, I've actually been mostly just playing Flex, which doesn't have positional queue, so I've just been kind of avoiding that. But I think it would be nice if there was more Splash LP. You know, if it was like a bigger effect on your other ranks, because I know in Masters Plus it doesn't exist anymore. It's just saying, okay, if you're a Masters player, you're just like good at every role, which I think is probably true, but or at least good enough that it shouldn't be putting you way below, right? You know, Masters player, I don't think it's possible for him to really be like platinum or something at another role. You know, like those differences I think are just too extreme. So I think for most people, it makes sense to have a fairly big splash in LP to the other role, so it doesn't feel like it's taking as long to get up. But hopefully they can work out some of the kinks and some of the the outliers, like the MR stuff has been fixed. Hopefully they can fix some of the other bugs and stuff, and people will start being happier with it.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it affected that many accounts, but especially at the beginning of the season, everyone's always going to have that feeling of like, this is not right.
This is an outrage,
and why do I have these teammates, Mark?
I mean, that's always a complaint though. Like for the longest time, even like
Hell.
Yeah, they're always like looking it up on op.gg and being like, this guy's a higher rating than I am. Why am I playing against him? Like that's always been there. So it's just like a new like shiny excuse to like pin on.
There also is, I definitely think, some misunderstandings about the difference between MMR and current rank. And I think I'm constantly surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, because I mean I worked on League and I worked on some of this stuff, so I have more insight into it than most people. But not to put him on blast, but even Lorlo was tweeting about how he was shocked that his account finished gold 1, but he's playing against Masters players, and it's like, well, but I believe his account was that's what it was before, and it decayed down, right? So it's like when you decay your rank, your MMR is not actually decaying at nearly that rate. Like your MMR can decay, but it's incredibly slow. So if you played a Masters or whatever, and then you finish gold 1, if you OPGG that account, you'll see, well, why is this guy who was in gold last season in my Masters games, but it has Masters MMR?
Yeah, and MMR stands for your matchmaking rating. That's what actually determines what people you're playing against in those games. For people that are unfamiliar with the abbreviations, but that's how, the super high rated people, like you're saying, you're still getting put in these same matches, except for, as you say, the decay, what it shows will be a lot lower.
And you're supposed to go flying up the ratings. Like I remember, this is anecdotal obviously, but I remember reading someone who was like, oh yeah, I like lost in promos twice and then like managed to win once, and I shot up like 3 tiers just because my MMR was high. And it was like, well, that's clearly
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to correct over time, right? All right. So you wanted to talk about, there was a 100 Thieves interview, or Double Lift interview on 100 Thieves. You want to talk about a bit?
Yes. So Team Liquid, there's been a lot of discussion around Team Liquid, right? Because this is our best team, very clearly, and yet a lot of people have been wanting them and more North American teams to play a lot quicker. Because we look around the world and we are the slowest average game time of any region. And, other regions do have their best teams. Like there's G2 in Europe and there's Griffin and LCK. This is the first time that I can remember that even the LCK is faster than us, like 2 minutes average game time faster than us. And so I thought this interview was very interesting, where Travis talks to Double F. They're initially talking about this 100 Thieves game. Where Del was like, they didn't do anything. I was expecting resistance. And yet a lot of people were saying, well, why didn't you finish the game faster then? Because it still took around like 38 minutes or something like that. And he had some interesting answers in that interview about, well, yes, they do agree that, they could have done it a bit faster. But also when they compared, if Cloud9 was in this game, they would have started Baron 5 minutes faster or something. He thought that was a bit too risky. And it's not like a a habit they want to get
Mhm.
in for if they play good teams, which is a topic that people have talked about ever since this last Worlds. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on should the pinnacle teams like G2 who are going super fast or Team Liquid, what's kind of the correct philosophy as far as how many risks you're taking, how fast you're pushing it, or do you not want to form bad habits of risky team fights?
I mean, for me, if they had a problem of like making too many mistakes, I could see that, but it doesn't feel like they have that problem. And going back to their previous international performances, it wasn't like, oh man, we were building leads, but then we just kept throwing them away. Darn it. If we were a more controlled team, we would have done fine. Like and obviously they changed 2 players out of their roster, so it's not the exact same roster, but like this doesn't feel like a team that to me is making too many mistakes. And so like I wouldn't mind seeing them take some gambles in the regular season. I understand not wanting to form bad habits, but like it doesn't feel like they're pushing themselves at all to make good ones either.
Yeah, I would say that it is contextual though, right? Like playing a slower game is not inherently worse, right? This is one thing that I do take a little bit of issue with this argument, is that people are pointing it out as, oh, slow games just automatically equals bad, right? LCK was the slowest league in the world for so many years when they're absolutely dominating everyone. So it's not inherently bad, but I think it's based on context. So where I would agree with kind of what Double of sentiment is, if you are like for sure hard out scaling this team, right? Then I don't think you need to take risks as much, right? You can kind of play it a bit more slowly. You can guarantee your win. If they're playing all early game, you're all late game, then sure, maybe you do that sort of style. But if you are comparable scaling, or you are even like worse scaling, then I really disagree. And then pushing the pace, I think, is actually the correct way to play the game for sure. And you want to close out the game before you give them too many opportunities or too much time to actually claw their way back in, right? Because if you're not expanding your lead and you're sitting on a 3 or 4K gold lead at 20 minutes, and that's the same at 30, 35 minutes, well, it doesn't matter anymore, right? The gold lead is essentially evaporated. And one of the things that I do think Cloud9 really stands out with to kind of compare to them in North America is that their vision control seems so much better around objectives than other teams. And I think that has been the biggest thing for me, is that they do such a good job of shutting teams out of games by not even allowing them to get into their own jungle to check on the Baron, right? And that is one thing that I think I haven't seen as much from TL, and it seems like more of their games are decided by the team fight rather than the really good objective control.
And I think that objective control around Baron is why people probably mentioned C9 as a comparison, because it was the same day, I think, when they both played their games, where C9 had like disgusting Baron control and like got turrets off it and got a Baron very quickly. And then TL actually had disgusting Baron control as well. And I think it was around the same time in the game. Both were like 25 minutes and onwards or something. And TL like doesn't force the Baron. They go to Drake and they play really slow and they reset, and the enemy team clears out all their vision. And so like I think that's why the comparison was made, because the champions were very different. I think C9 was snowballing harder, but like it was a similar thing where it's like you've completely choked out enemy vision. What do you do from here? And it was clear Team Liquid was the more relaxed, slow played team.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'd say the one game that was kind of a different strategy for Team Liquid was the York game, where they picked it early for impact, and they seemed like, okay, yeah, we're gonna try this, split push.
There's a lot wrong with it.
Yeah, I was like, don't start Isaac. You had a whole segment about
exactly. Like so that's the game where I feel like they deviated from picking, we're going to be able to outscale. Doublelift and Jensen are both on super reliable late game carries, and Impact is the front line, and and that's kind of their formula for these longer. Yeah, we don't have to take a lot of risks for these team fights and kind of build up your early lead, and then have supreme security in the late game. And that's the game where they lost, and where everybody is dumping on them for these mistakes. So you can kind of see some of the mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I can get it, but I also just thought that there was so many different issues that it's kind of like conflating the.
Yeah, there were a lot of individual mistakes and bad decisions.
There was
that
bad
went
team
along with
decisions.
it.
The draft was bad. There was individual mistakes on execution. There's all kinds of issues with that game. So to me, that wasn't just like, oh well, you tried early game and it doesn't work, so now you should go back, right? And so I don't think that one really illustrated the point to me. There was also another interview kind of talking about game time and all this, and Sven, the kind of headline quote from this interview is, matches don't usually go to late game anymore unless the team that is winning is bad. And, he goes on to say, okay, well, Optic is a bad team. That's why they take a long time to win their games that they're winning. And, in talking about some of the different ways in which the game is more quickly closed out. I've seen a number of coaches kind of talking about this as well, that they feel it's harder to kind of come back with some of the different mechanics that are in there now to help close out games. So certainly, getting the lead might take a while, but it feels like if you are ahead, you should be able to close out some of the games. And
it's
as
funny
far as,
because TSM themselves have had several early leads, and they not only had trouble closing out, but lost the games.
there you go. Maybe they're bad, or they
Kayle
were.
FlyQuest, second slowest game time in the league.
Yeah.
So maybe they're terrible.
Yeah, I think that TSM is good, and the top three right now, Team Liquid, Cloud9, TSM, are exactly the three that I ranked coming into the season as 1, 2, 3, and I think that those are. Thank you. I think those are like they've made strong cases for deserving those spots. I think that TSM also deserve their ranking there. Yes, they did make a lot more mistakes earlier on in the season, but
they look way better now.
Exactly, they do look way better now, and I do think the game is geared in the way that they're talking about in Sven's interview, where the early, you should be focusing more on early, getting these plates, getting control of the dragons as your way to victory, which brings us all the way back to this Team Liquid point. Right now, if Team Liquid played G2, the best in NA versus the best in Europe, slower, less risk versus quicker, more aggressive,
I think everyone's going to bet
win?
on G2. I think that G2, one of the biggest things that's working for them is how flexible they are with their drafts. And I think that Team Liquid is not nearly as flexible with their drafts. So I think that's one of the big things there. As far as the speed of the teams, I mean, partially it's also LEC plays a lot of like win lane, win game style stuff. They play a ton of cannon top. They play a ton of Draven bot. They play a lot of these bully style champions that they get advantages, and then they're very good at trying to speed up the game and close it out. I don't think G2 is infallible, but I certainly think I would favor them right now in a match, because especially coming off that off the tail ad, right? If all their games were slow, but it's like, well, you never make any mistakes, right? Then maybe you'd be more inclined to give it to them. But I think that I would probably favor TL's bot lane, but their flexibility is something that maybe like erases some of that advantage.
Yeah, as Doublelift was also memeing in that interview about his Vladimir play. He was playing it in solo queue, whereas Perks can play whatever mage
every mid laner
they need. They can do the Yasuo bot and all that type of stuff. But it does feel like Team Liquid a bit more set in their ways.
Yeah, I'd probably go with G2. But it is true that like the way that you win sometimes is more impressive if you're like this super lane dominant, aggressive team. And it is true that if the two teams played and they couldn't get the same lead against TL because their laners are super good and TL absorbs the pressure, like G2 wouldn't have experience, because their average game time I think is like 28 minutes. It's insanely low.
Yeah, they're slamming their league.
Right. So like people keep bringing up the game time thing, and like I think the reason it matters a lot is because you get into such different situations if the game does start going past that 35-minute mark, where it's like, hey, suddenly Elder's on the map. I don't think G2's seen an Elder Drake. So like, do they know how to play if it's up? So like, it's a weird thing where like, if TL does survive the early pressure, like it's like,
what is this new dragon?
Yeah, what is
Why is the dragon so big?
Yeah, what the hell? So I think it is weird that like as game time goes on, it's
a different situation.
It's a different situation that they probably have less practice in than Team Liquid. So
yeah.
I still didn't get G2 wins, but like if they didn't get the same early leads, I think they actually are in trouble.
Yeah, and I don't think it's extremely like a one-sided affair. I wouldn't expect, because I think that a lot of people are looking back to TL versus some of the European teams before, and I think one of the huge advantages that the European teams had was it was Caps and Perks versus Pobelter, and Pobelter internationally has not been able to stand up to those guys, whereas Jensen has been very good in lane internationally. So I think that's where he's had a lot of his success. And then if your mid lane is holding up and you are drafting these scaling compositions, I think that certainly like that can be a way to win. It's just a very different style than what G2 is playing.
Yeah, I feel like the reason I favor the quicker style is coming off of this year's Worlds. That was where all the success was, right? That's how EU and NA made it further than ever before.
Play your game.
Playing your own style, playing quicker, looking for these opportunities. And then I feel like in the offseason after that Worlds, the game was changed to benefit those types of play styles even more. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And I feel like the top teams of each region kind of define the rest of the teams in that region. And so, Team Liquid has this style of mindset. So it feels like the rest of NA is kind of adapting to that and trying to play to that also, because they have to fight this, they're always going to pick, super strong backline for Doublelift and Jensen. And then they make more kind of reserve choices. Do you think that's true? Or
I was gonna say, I don't want to jump. I don't know where the topic list is going, but like C9 is the clear counterpoint to that, as the second place team. Where like they obviously don't agree with that.
And TSM
still is playing more aggressive, but they play like Casio for Sven. Like they are still picking a fair amount of backline, even if like the top side is a completely different thing. Like they still pick a lot of late game carries.
Well, it was one Casio game.
One Casio game, but hasn't he played mostly Sivir and Kaisa and Ezreal and stuff like that? Yeah. So like for the most part, he's still playing late game. But C9 is super aggressive. They're way faster in their win time than Team Liquid. And they think, there was an interview with Azael where he was like, I think we're actually better than Team Liquid right now if scrims can be believed at all. And like he was saying that he actually thinks that they could beat them. So like maybe if C9 is able to win, they can change up how the rest of NA is playing or something, but it is not just like NA has this one style. I think it's nice that our teams are different.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this kind of leads me into something I wanted to talk about a bit with you guys. And this is a bit of a pattern I've seen with a number of picks of kind of the monkey see, monkey do, where people watch a top team from one region. Everyone right now is going to watch Griffin, right? So you watch Griffin, it's like, okay, well, what are they playing there? Oh, okay, we got some Olaf with Redemption. All right, that's what we're playing. All right, we got some Galio support. Okay, we're going to play that too, right? And what is your thought process around seeing some of the teams that are just trying to emulate versus what I felt like we saw at Worlds, which was really the teams that had their own style and were sticking to that were successful, right? Vitality was having their wins and their success, through this Draven picks and through these unique things. And even all the way back to the previous year at Worlds, Misfits bringing out all their counter picks against SKT, and the Leona bot and all these cool things. It has felt like we have seen so much success through playing your own way. And yet again, it feels like this year, so many teams, and not just in NA, around the world, they're just defaulting back to, all right, I watch Griffin, I copy Griffin.
I don't feel like people have been copying. I like, okay, so Golden Guardians, the Froggen team, right? They're definitely not copying anybody. And we also have, so there's a fine line between seeing a pick or a strategy and trying to incorporate that just as a good idea, and then copying some strategy without understanding why it works. So that's where I draw the line. Like the Olaf with Redemption or a Galio support. To me, if you see that and you're understanding the strengths of, getting Redemption early, you can have a bigger impact in team fights and skirmishes with someone else trying to get an AoE heal down to be able to win those. And if you understand the balance of what you would give up for not getting Cinderhulk early in terms of your clear speed, or the Galio support, right? Griffin ran it 2 times. They did run it with an Ezreal exactly the same way as CLG ran it. I don't think that was the Galio support fault.
No, but it's
that he got hit 9 times in a row with hooks in the bottom lane.
It's not, but I also think that the way that teams are utilizing these things, I don't think they're actually looking at the context of it a lot of the times. It feels like, so yeah, people understand why an Olaf can be good, but I don't feel like Griffin is able to run those sort of strategies because they're so incredible at closing out games, and they're so incredible at snowballing advantages. I think part of the strength of the Redemption Rush style build is that it's a cheap early item and he completes it right away, and then they're fighting around neutral objectives on this like one item power spike that's actually really powerful for team fighting. And similarly, I think that the Galio, as well as Shen support and some of these other picks that are popping up in Korea, are working well because they're playing them into weak laners. They're playing them into champions that are scaling and don't have a lot of kill threat. And then if they're going to take scaling in their AD, the way that they're kind of matching this is by taking more utility in their support and a weaker laning phase, right? If you play a support Galio into something like a Thresh, which does have a lot of kill threat, then you can be punished. Similarly, one of the games, I believe it was a Griffin game, where they actually played the Galio into a Lucian Braum, and he gets killed 2v2 right early in the game. So I think that it's not just understanding the pick, it's understanding the situations in which a pick works, and that's where I feel like sometimes teams are not really taking
played it into Ezreal Braum and Yasuo Gragas.
Yeah, and both times the Galio was punished pretty hard in lane. Everyone remembers Azael actually having a good game overall with it, but I think he was 0-3 at some point in that game. It's a really interesting thing. There's two things that jump to mind. One is like when you see something good from a good team in the world, you see like the situations it's succeeding in, and you probably didn't learn its pitfalls and like what they were avoiding when they picked it. And so like that's something that you have to like get experience on, is like learning when a champ is good and when a champ is bad and all those kinds of things. And you won't see it through 1 or 2 games. And so I remember, this is going back a little bit, but like when Hecarim top became a thing, like No Face team played it or something in Korea, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, let's all do it. In North America, everyone started playing Hecarim top and just sucked for a long time with it, because I don't think they really understood all the pros and cons of the pick. And then like over time, they kind of figured out, and then Hecarim top's one of the best top laners in the league. And so I think a lot of the time people see something good, it is a good pick and you should learn it. But like the first couple times you break it out, you probably don't understand it.
Yeah. And I think that's where we're all drawing the line. It's like, all right, have you practiced this enough where you can quickly incorporate it into your skill set and into your team? Or, you know, is it a face plant? And sometimes also, since we have best of ones on stage, it can look like a complete face
Even
plant.
if you've done your due diligence.
And then, we interview the coach afterwards, and they're like, he was 20-0 every goddamn script. What happened here? I don't even understand. Like,
yeah. The other point I was going to talk about is like how mid to low tier teams almost feel like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Where like if you pick this new thing that's meta and you fail on it, it's like play your style, and then they play their style and they lose, and it's like, why don't you just play the meta? Like, you guys are too stupid to figure out your own champs.
Yeah.
And a team like Golden Guardians, who is playing a pretty weird style, all things considered. Like they're picking non-meta, hyper-scaling mages in the mid lane. And stuff.
Victor,
yeah, and they're winning with it. Even analysts who are like, well, this is good for their team, but like there's probably a ceiling on this play style. Like, can they really like, even though I think we would all agree that that's better than them like trying to play hyper early game or something, because it doesn't seem like they can do that. You're still going to get criticism in your wins where it's like, this isn't normal.
It's interesting. So you think I haven't actually seen them getting criticism for that. So for me at least, I think playing non-meta is totally good as long as it's like for Froggen in particular, as long as he has enough picks that he cannot be just banned out of them, right? If it's like, well, you have Anivia, you have Karthus, and you have your Victor, and those are your 3 good ones, and then you have no others, then yeah, I think there's an issue with that. But I think as long as you have enough picks that you can't actually be targeted, if you are successful with non-meta picks, I actually think it's really good to play.
Criticism not as in like they shouldn't be doing it, but criticism in like well, I don't really buy into this team as one of the top teams in the league if this is how they pick up their wins kind of thing, where it's like, you know, people were saying it about CLG too, where it's like, oh, they're playing tanky front lines and NA's bad and scales to late game, and then they win through outscaling their opponent. Like, yeah, you're picking up wins that way, but people feel like they're not ready to like vouch for this team being like a legit team in North America or something, where like if you have a weirder play style that's working out, people seem to find reasons not to believe in you.
That's interesting. Because I really disagree with, like, at least like I think it's a good way to play as long as you're not limited, right? So like when we talk about impact and people talk about impact needs to find more picks, so you can't just play tanks. I'm like, no, you actually can just play tanks. You can play other champions that fit in that play style and find the opportunities where a Singed works and a Malphite works and, you know, a Maokai works into heavy AP and so on and so forth. And I think that you can find your play style that works really well for your team, and then instead of trying to change your playstyle, find all the picks that fit into that playstyle and kind of insert those.
And Impact has done that on the world stage, by the way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to like emphasize that he has always had more picks, you know, in his pocket.
He has a lot
when people are like, oh my God, what's he gonna do? Sign was the only tank. It's all garbage now. What like
but it has also been Jace being there, and that didn't work.
Yeah, that's true. He has played a decent amount of bruisers though. And I think he has had more success on those.
I liked his Silas. I thought that makes sense.
His Aatrox was good at the start of the season before it got nerfed.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah, for sure.
I wasn't saying necessarily that they shouldn't be doing it either. I'm just saying like it feels like anytime a team does that, a lot of people in the community poo-poo it a little bit and downplay success through what is seen as like a singular play style.
You
like,
cheese them.
Everyone wants like every team to be able to play every play style. It's like when TSM was dominant like 2 years ago, and they're like, we're working on our Galio Jarvan comp. And then they lost a bunch of games, and then they got good with it, but then they never played it when it mattered. And it was like, well, why'd you spend all that time learning Jarvan Galio if like when Worlds runs around and it's still meta and it's still a good combo, you don't run it? What was the point of practicing that? So like, I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, is they have this idea that like every top team should play every style kind of thing.
All right, Azael, we have a direct meta tweet for you.
Okay.
Simon Vaughn wants to know, are we going to get a dive segment where you discuss the new Kayle? I know, Azael, that you have played her for years. Do the teams need to start practicing this rework right now?
So I haven't played it yet. So I wait. You will.
All right, next question.
You will get a segment when I start playing it. I don't really play on PvE, but when it comes out on live, I am gonna definitely spam it.
I know that it looks sick. I've seen the trailer.
And you know me, I love farming and sitting in a side lane. And now I'll have more of an excuse because I'm like, guys, I just need level 16. Just chill out. I'm gonna take all your farm too, Kobe, because that'll get me level 16 faster.
Joke's on you. Jungle camps don't give very much experience.
Isaac, the laning phase is weak. Haven't you heard the PB feedback?
Yeah. Okay. So this is something that I also wanted to talk about a bit with this. So August, the designer for Kayle, he had a clip that was clipped out from his Twitch stream, and it was on Reddit, and it was talking about PB feedback and some of the struggles that the balance team has and these designers have when balancing their new champions. And he referenced a couple examples. So Rengar was one, the Rengar rework that he put out. He's saying they're getting all this feedback nonstop. PB Rengar 20-0 every game comes out at 42% win rate, I believe it was.
Yeah, on PBE 20-0 every game. Everybody's crying.
So overpowered.
Nerf this champion, he's crazy. But then on live, and it doesn't go up. The win rate stays at 44% till they buff him.
Yep, exactly. Then he gave the counterpoint of Skarner. When they did the Skarner rework, everyone's saying this champion is garbage. It's unplayable.
Skarner mains were all saying that.
Yeah, they buff it. I was actually on playtest when this happened too.
Oh.
I remember, and we were on playtest. We actually thought it was good, but everyone on PB was so convinced that this champion was garbage. And so they buffed it again. It came out at 60% win rate. It was so overpowered, it wasn't even funny. And so,
it's kind of funny.
It was ridiculous. So that was Captain Flower's chance to get Challenger, by the way. He missed it. Anyway, so this is kind of the struggle that they go through, is that PB feedback becomes pretty unreliable because there's such varying degrees of skill. The games are so unbalanced, right? There's not really even matchmaking going on there. It's like if you get a Challenger one trick for Rengar to go in and try, he's gonna
It was literally Night Blue, all of those games, crushing gold
beating
people.
silver people and bronze people and whatnot. So it is very hard to balance. And I do think, I remember when I first heard his idea for Kayle, and he was kind of telling me what his thought process was and what he wanted to make it, I was thinking, oh my God, this champion's gonna be hard to balance, because his whole initial pitch was basically, this champion is gonna be really weak at the start. You're walking on the ground, you're melee, you're not doing a lot.
You're a tadpole.
But you're starting to build up, and and then kind of at your break points, you get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then at your true hyper carry, you're slamming everyone at 16, right? And I do think that a champion like this will be pretty polarizing, because you're gonna have the games where you don't ever get to that stage and you look absolute garbage, and you're gonna have those games where you do get to that stage and you completely take over, right? And I think that champions like that can be very hard for pro play. So whether or not I think it's going to work in pro play is going to be dependent on its actual strength pre-16, right? Because that's where everyone just says it becomes God mode. Because if it is incredibly weak at those early stages, then I think teams are going to try to play early game and going to try to force around it and try to force it to do things before it's actually ready. I also think that it can be pretty polarizing, because if this is in your game, it feels like it forces the jungler's hand on both sides, right? If I'm a Kayle on your team, you better be defending me because I'm the win condition. And if I'm a Kayle on the other team, you better be ganking me because you better not let me get to 16 where I'm just God mode. So I think it's interesting in principle. I'll be very curious to see how it actually works in effect when it's out on live.
I think in competitive play, since you brought it up, that's kind of how carry tops are a lot of the time right now anyways, where if you pick a carry top, everyone understands that's probably where junglers need to go. So
this is supposed to be even more extreme,
right? So but it's something that I think pro players are the most part, we've played around scaling carry tops before. Solo queue, probably a different story, but with how the game works right now, it feels like maybe North America is the exception to the rule, so I'll speak more broadly, but if games are ending at 33 minutes, it's hard to get to 16 and be powered up and stuff like that. So it might not work that well. Silas is another champion who power spikes really hard at 16, but his getting there isn't complete booty. He can still skirmish and scrap and be a regular champion until that point. So if Kayle really is like this, I'm AFK for the first 20 minutes of the game while I'm powering up, probably aren't going to see it.
Yeah, my problem is if it actually, if that is realized, then that makes the team that Kayle is on feel bad.
Yeah.
It's my problem that I've always had with Master Yi jungles. And I've always been super happy to see it on the enemy team because, yeah, this guy is like super excited to farm up a whole bunch and then be super powerful and be like, yes, I'm the best. I'm going to carry later. But it makes your whole team feel like garbage. Or in the eventuality, if your team carries you through the early game and then you get to this fed point and you've been basically leeching resources from your team the whole time, and then you're finally strong and you come out like, haha, I'm here to carry you, plebs. And everyone's like, oh,
yeah,
great. Like we did all the work, and now this guy's like popping off in all chat, flaming
he's getting the penta, he's taking the glory.
And you're like, yeah, well done, Master Yi. You were able to farm because we like dealt with all these
Meanwhile,
guys.
I got ganked 18 times in a row by a Pantheon.
Yeah.
I'm 0-16 under my turret.
I feel like Master Yi's set back all junglers, a couple years here where we just get flamed more for those types of play styles. But I feel like if that happened, like that's what the type of Kayle effect on both teams will be. The enemy team will be like, this team or this Kayle is like so fed, we can't do anything. And their own team is going to also complain about the weak early game.
And that's why it depends so much on just how weak the early game actually is. Because Fiora is an example where Fiora is supposed to be this hyperscaling champion and blah, blah, blah. But there's actually a number of matchups where a Grasp Fiora can actually just slam you in the early levels.
Yeah.
Fiora has strong early laning. So yes, there are matchups that can abuse her, and there are matchups where at certain breakpoints you're stronger than her and whatnot. But that's a hyperscaling champion that it's not weird to lose lane to her on a number of different champs.
Yeah, I think GP is probably the closest thing we had in competitive to like, I'm going to int the early game. And like, it didn't matter if you fell 20 CS behind, lost your shirt and died twice. Like if you farmed well and got your items and were getting klepto procs, it's like, great. You're going to now alt bot lane and like change the whole game. And like Kayle, GP had a lot of tools to do that, and it feels like Kayle's more like selfish, whereas like GP could poke from long range with barrels and like alt bot lane in the early game or alt his lane to like back off the turret. Like, I don't know.
You got double heal, you got the ultimate.
Well,
good.
Kayle is not going to be in the LCS this weekend. 9.4 as a whole is though, and I am super excited because Rek'Sai is back. Been playing her a whole bunch, and it's really fun to play a burst damage early game jungler again.
Is it fun to watch, Kobe? Look at the tunneling. Look at the tunnel network. It's so efficient.
It's like basically the thing to track if we're casting Rek'Sai games is, does she have flash? Yep. All right, somebody's gonna die. Does she not have flash? Oh well, it's maybe stay burrowed for a while and track some people.
Yeah.
But I think she's really strong. I think she will show up in pro play, especially for the teams like Cloud9, like TSM that are trying to pressure early game. That have these junglers like Acadian where they're like, all right, go crazy. We're gonna pick some strong lanes, go invade people and get these kills. And I think that Rek'Sai actually there are some fun things like if they max E or Q, trying to get lower cooldowns on their tunnels to say mobile. Also, the combos. Are you going to, now if you hit Prey Seeker ahead of time, it does give you Fury, so you don't have as long charge up for your true damage into your ultimate. And like the ultimate moments are kind of cool because you can dodge stuff with your ultimate as well. So I think there are some fun moments.
Mark
He's trying to sell me, there's some cool combos. Now you Q and it matters when you hit the Prey Seeker.
Fair enough. The ult dodging is cool though. If you ult to dodge like someone's ultimate and you kill someone,
I miss old Rek'Sai still.
Really?
I loved the playstyle of old Rek'Sai with like the farm alarm stuff, which I understand is probably even more boring because you don't have the ult. But I think we have a lot of really good Rek'Sai players in North America, so this should go well. Like Santorin should be good with it. Smithy should be good with Rek'Sai. Like a lot of these guys.
I know firsthand Meteos is good with it.
Yeah, Meteos if he's in.
Asked my whole team to flame me.
Was this something happened in solo queue?
When we had Meteos, when we had him on last time, we were talking about a game. I played against him. He was Rek'Sai. I was Ivern. He kills our top, mid, and bottom in the first 4 minutes, and everyone's just flaming me super hard. I'm like, well, he's a pro jungler. What am I supposed to do?
Yikes.
The one thing I will say I'm excited for Rek'Sai is just to have another early game jungler, because I
Yeah.
do like, I think the champion itself is not necessarily exciting, but the situations it can
You guys
create.
are some Rek'Sai haters.
Well, I mean, it's which is gonna have the better highlight, Lee Sin or Rex?
Lee Sin is always gonna have the better highlight.
Exactly.
I mean,
Or
even
even Gragas. Gragas is another one that I think is
Yeah,
exciting.
even like Camille can be pretty cool.
I just think the champion itself is not super exciting, but the situations it creates can be fun, because I do think that you can do really interesting gank paths. It's more easy to actually avoid vision and find ways to pressure the game, and I think that can speed up game times and can create more action, which I'm excited for. I definitely think Rek'Sai is going to be in there a lot. I also am even more excited that Urgot is not going to be in there.
What do you mean? Ding dong, Urgot dead.
I think Urgot is out of there. Urgot's win rate
costs like twice as much now.
Yeah, 20 more mana on the Q and the W. The W shield is cut in half at rank 1, and since you don't max it first, that's a while before you start getting points in that. We talked about it previously when Freak was on. I thought it was going to be dead. I think for sure it's dead now. Now that it's come out, it went down something like 6% win rate according to our internal data, and I think that this should finally have it completely out of the top lane. And I think it's just not a super fun pick. So having that gone, I think we've already seen there's more flexibility in top lane now around some of the cool picks coming in. I think this is going to open up for even more of that. Teams that were reliant on it though could be a bit hurt by it.
Yeah, I mean, luckily Scion is still like feels like an okay like blind meatball kind of tank, but outside that, you're starting to stretch really thin on OPs in the top lane, because Kayle died, Aatrox died, Urgot's now died, and
Aatrox. I think the death of Aatrox has been exaggerated.
That's fair.
Both in the jungle and even in top lane.
He's dead. In North America.
He revived. He's got enough.
he's still doing well in pro. It's true. I had felt like he was definitely pretty dead, but he still seems to be fairly successful, just because. I mean, so you can't do the combos as reliably, but the ultimate is still so powerful in early game fights. He can actually draw a lot of pressure and essentially create space as someone who is an early game damage threat still. So he still has a lot of power there. But the thing that I'm really excited with Urgot being gone is that teams that are reliant on a pick like that is really safe, you can then just ban Scion, right? Because there's so many less. Aatrox, at least I think, is for sure gone from the ban list. We've seen that much, right? Is fallen completely through a lot of drafts. You don't have to ban Urgot anymore. You don't have to ban a Kayle anymore. You don't have to ban a lot of these picks anymore. So it's opening up to actually target some of the teams that are reliant on that. And I think that you can then see more matchups where someone can be exploited, right? It's harder to protect your top laner if Urgot sucks and Scion is banned out, and some of these other picks are also nerfed. So I love seeing counter matchups. I love seeing exciting carry play. So I think that can open up for a lot more.
Exciting Conqueror play, you mean?
Yes.
Is there anything from this patch specifically that you're looking forward to, Mark? Because the new Conqueror has also
that just seems troll to me. Like
new Conqueror / new Fervor.
Yeah, plus like a bit of a fleet footwork maybe. 'Cause you get healing now. Like it just does everything. It's true damage, stacking adaptive damage, and healing.
Yeah.
It definitely seems a little overloaded. And I know that they turned the numbers down, but
yeah, they hotfixed a little bit of the power by taking some of the numbers down. But.
Yeah, and I understand it's supposed to be like the keystone for someone who wants to be like in an extended fight and like can stack it quickly, but it does feel like a bit of like everybody wants this, and that's when you have to start putting the conditional nerfs in, which I don't really like, when it's like range only get 2 seconds now, down from 3, and like you start doing all those like kind of wonky nerfs because the rune itself does too much, I think.
Yeah, it does do a lot, but I will say I think it's somewhat exaggerated how crazy it is, because you can't actually prep it, right? So old Conqueror, you just prepped on minions and then you had it instantly for your trade. What this is more powerful than old Conqueror for is either A, if you can insta-stack it. I mean, I think Kled was a big winner with it. Riven actually was the champion that went up the most win rate with it. So I think people are for sure going to be wanting to ban out Viper, right? But there are some champions like that. But people who did short trades, old Conqueror was for sure better, right? Because you actually just stacked it up, and then your Jax, and you just hopped in, you leap strike them, and you W them, and then you back off, right? Those sorts of things. But it definitely does. I feel like it has made it so you want to play tanks even less, almost, because yes, it maybe does less immediate damage, but the fact that there's actually sustain on this as well allows some champions to actually be skipping that and just kind of be vamping through a lot of your actual low damage that a tank is going to put out. So yeah, new Conqueror is pretty scary, but it got nerfed. It got hotfix nerfed, and I think they're even considering nerfing it again in the new patch in 9.5. So I definitely think it's going to get looked at, but for now, a lot of those melee champions that can use it really well, I think think are very powerful.
Well, if there are going to be less tanks, then that gives me more hope that my biggest hope for this patch, Zed's return, comes true. Because I do like these changes. They took away, we talked about it last time, but they took away the reliancy on the R stealing AD, making all the Zeds feel like they have to go kill the enemy AD carry like as soon as possible to, steal some attack damage, and gave big buffs to the W. I love it when they buff, mobility of champions and like the speed of champions, spells and stuff like that, because that just feels better to play, even if maybe you have lower damage numbers or you don't have as much, flat AD or anything like that. If you have the ability to create more outplays and more, mobility like this, the increased range and the lower cooldown for Ws, and I feel like that opens it up to pro play, to see some pop off Zed players. Bjergsen's been tweeting about it ever since it went live on his birthday. And TSM have been playing lane dominant invade with Acadian style play. So I actually think that we'll get some. Europe already had one Zed before even these changes went live, but I'm hoping we get some in NA.
I think you can definitely see it because we're not in a very protective meta, I guess. We're if you get onto a marksman right now, there's not that much help coming their way. Like maybe a Tom Kench is in the game.
They all got Phantom Dancers now.
Yeah, maybe a tank uses their CC on you, but it's not like a Janna blowing you away or Lulu polymorphing you type stuff. So it is a pretty open game, it feels like, for assassins.
The other requirement that you kind of always have when you do have Zed in there is it feels like it forces someone else to play AP, because right now most of the teams are just bringing that in the mid lane. And we did see Sven played Cassio bot. So if you have a team that can play, Vlad top or Victor top or Cassio bot or whatever, things like that, I think it opens up pretty well for it. But we're not really seeing any AP junglers in the meta these days in pro. I guess
Elise, I think Elise is coming back.
There's been a little bit of progress.
Yeah. Also, I always track the top 4 or 5 junglers in Korean solo queue, just to check up and try and steal something if they come up with anything new. And a lot of them have been spamming Elise. So
I'm looking forward
to be back.
Rumble with the new changes to Conqueror. You stack it up
Rumble
on
is the highest win rate of any mid lane.
You stack it with Flame Spitter. You get the adaptive damage.
Interesting. We have on NA. There's a mid Rumble one trick that always has been floating around like Masters level. So they definitely have people to practice against to get ready if that does come back.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Urgot lowest win rate in the game for any recorded top laner now.
He had his time.
He's down below the Master Yi, who got autofilled to top, and is so it's looking rough. But we'll have to see what the teams are going to bring out. Excited for the weekend. We can talk about NALCS. There are very clearly a top 3 teams right now. It is TLC9, TSM. Everyone kind of acknowledges that these are the best 3. And, the question is now becoming, is Liquid still number 1? You talked about Azael saying that he thinks that they're actually better than TL right now if scrims are indicative of anything. And teams are talking about, okay, well, TL had their loss to TSM. Does that mean TSM's better than them? How do you guys see it?
I kind of see it as C9 and TSM trying to overthrow Team Liquid, who are playing the slower style of the past, less risk or whatever. And C9 and TSM are coming up, knocking at the door, we're coming with the early game. We're gonna overthrow
some angry mob.
I'm creating a comic book intro here for the
I was almost seeing the Kool-Aid man jumping through the wall. Early game.
I was seeing a French Revolution with pitchforks. I was like, what?
They're like, your time is over, double it. But it's super exciting to me because I actually what was the one on Sunday? We've got a super hype matchup. It's C9 versus TSM. So maybe that's one to be able to crown the next prince or whatever who's gonna come try and take over Team Liquid. I do keep Team Liquid as the de facto number 1 spot until it actually happens though. As much as Azael can say in scrims, blah, blah, blah. I've heard that so many times. Every time we go to Worlds, I always get hyped up again because everybody's doing great in scrims and all that.
And they always suck you back in.
But, we need to see some of that stuff on stage for me to be convinced, especially since NA has been a lot of teams trending, maybe not all of them, but a lot more of them trending toward risk-averse style play.
I think it's interesting too because when we're talking about how will TL hold up against international faster teams, like, well, this is like their first. You got to hold up against the domestically fast teams first, and I think it's hard to say that they'll lose to these teams because the TSM game, like, come on, like the Yorick top plus how Smithy played and like the whole team, like, did TSM beat them or did they throw? You know, kind of one of those. A bit of both for sure, but like I want to see someone beat TL when they're looking good, like on that day, and then you can say like, okay, they've been overthrown.
That's exactly how I feel. I want to see them lose with their own style, right? You know, the first pick Yorick game, they even admit that it was a bad pick. I even saw Doublelift. I think it was Avali did some quick interview with him, and he's like, "Yeah, the memes about the first pick Yorick are kind of right." That's pretty, you know. So
we were trolling.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I think that wasn't great. I think TSM played great, and they are playing much better. So credit to them. But I still think TL remains number one until someone shows that they can beat TL playing TL's game. So that is what I'm very excited to see, and it would also be really interesting if a C9 or TSM is getting more and more focused on the early game style and they beat TL, then what is TL's response, right? Do they just try to continue polishing and go, no, we're still going to try to play this slow style and just be more perfect? Or are they then having to kind of completely change the way that they're playing and try to shift their focus to early? Because Jensen is a guy who used to always play that style, who was lane dominant and really aggressive. And I believe it was the interview with Bjergsen where he was talking about, well, you know, he didn't think Jensen played that well in the TSM TL game where TSM did beat them. And he was saying that he thought that Jensen was just kind of playing very safe and he used to always be super aggressive and trying to slam you in lane and dominate through lane. And now he's playing this different style. And I think, to me, part of that reason is that he has so many more carries that he really trusts now. You know, he's looking at Doublelift and he's looking at these other guys around him and he's saying, okay, Core JJ, Doublelift, you guys are going to make a huge difference for us, and kind of putting faith in the team and not feeling like he has to be as aggressive, but maybe that's the wrong choice.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because if they do lose early game or to like one of these early game teams, then you're saying they have to adapt, and everyone.
Well, do they? That's the question.
I guess do they? But it's interesting because people keep saying they can, but they are still playing the same way that they played last year. It's just Jensen's better and Core JJ is better, and they made upgrades and all that. But like, if they actually lose domestically, then you kind of have to put your money where your mouth is and actually probably try a different style. Like, can you actually play mid-centric, or is this team just going to stay like Doublelift focused? So part of me wants to see them lose so that they have to answer that question about what they do.
The other thing is, I mean, you could still play an early game style through bot, right?
Sure.
You can do Lucian and Draven and some of these really aggressive picks in the early game. And, you know, if Doublelift were actually to learn some of those non-marksman picks, some of those can obviously play very aggressive. We know Jensen can play lane dominant style. So it would be interesting to see if they went for it.
All right. Well, before either of them get their crack at Team Liquid, they get a matchup on Sunday. I feel like we should preview this TSM Cloud9 because it's the most exciting matchup for our weekend. And both of them are being kind of set up as, you know, a lot of this early game control. I think that so much of it is going to come down to how they work with their junglers in their game. I have to say, Acadian has fit in really well with the TSM squad as far as changing the face and kind of direction of this team. He plus Broken Blade, though, a lot of times where those two are making plays together, one or the other has made some mistake that you can very clearly see, like the other guy back off or the other guy's not thinking the same thing. So I think that might be one crucial point where Cloud9 would have the advantage because Licorice and Sven Skaren have worked together a lot more cleanly, I feel like.
That's if Acadian's playing. I had a caller on the other great show on the North American scene.
We've even been on it. You can say it.
This guy called in and said he was wearing a Grig jersey at the LCS this last weekend, and he got a picture with Reggie, who was like just floating around or something. And Reggie said to the guy, hey, you're going to be really excited next weekend based off that jersey or something.
Ooh.
So who knows if it's just Reggie being Reggie, because I feel like you can't trust that guy at all with what he says publicly. Why is that funny? Isn't that true? Like he's just
it's just funny how it felt like you rushed in the second part. You're like, you can't trust Reggie at all with what he says on
yeah, specifically with what he says.
What he says publicly, which is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he said he'll just go into like Twitch chat and spam random stuff.
That's true.
But it would be weird to see the change up because I do want to see like the Acadian versus Sven versus Broken Blade versus Licorice, like the top 2v2, which is where it feels like both these teams are playing, and if they did play against TSM, where they would have the advantage.
Plus, it's kind of funny because now that Acadian has been the guy that they've been playing with for a while, and they've had those big improvements with him. If they brought in Greg and they lost, everyone would just say, "Oh well, it's just because Acadian wasn't there."
Yeah.
You know, even though he wasn't necessarily the intended.
I feel like they
starter.
shouldn't care what fans say so much with things like that, though.
Oh no, I agree, but I do think players are super affected by it, right?
Yeah.
You know, from talking to a lot of players, people do care a lot about that, and you know, I've had players tell me that they felt like the team mentality was even destroyed when talking about a specific player. If Reddit is super focused on, well, this MarkZ guy, he's really boosted, he's always losing us bot lane, right? You see it every week because Reddit does get focused on very specific players, and if it's the same person getting flamed every week and getting blamed every week, then teams can kind of get that in their head. Well, maybe it is his fault. But I'd be excited to see if Grig came out. Either way, I think this matchup is going to be super hype. I think Cloud9 has certainly still looks like the better team to me because, you know, looking at the body of their work, I think the last couple of weeks is more arguable, but they have been very good the whole season. I also think that, you know, their top side should certainly be favored with Licorice and Sven Skaren, but Bjergsen was an absolute beast against Jensen in the TL game, and I think Acadian played incredibly well. Those were the two standout players against TL for me. So, you know, if Bjergsen is slamming lane against Niski, we know their bot lane is really good. It could be a very, very high.
Now that he can play Zed,
Sure.
You buy it?
Yeah.
First pick, blind pick.
Yeah. I think what's interesting too is like which smoothie shows up on the day, because it feels like
Yeah,
Is it going to be the strawberry banana?
or the dead in lane.
Oh!
He's had some rough laning
the
games.
thresh smoothie.
Yeah, that, or is it going to be what was it? The one where the Braum where he just puts his shield up versus Ornn randomly and gets them killed. Like he's had a couple games like that where they make a lot of like big laning mistakes, and I feel like Azael has been much more consistent. So like if Smoothie shows up and he's playing a really good game, I don't think it's a concern at all. But like it does feel a little worrying.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think Smoothie is a guy that, you know, seems like a very emotional player to me. Like he can really get hyped up and be feeling it and be playing great. And sometimes I think he can be kind of getting very nervous due to the pressure. So we'll see how he's actually going to handle it. You know, going up against your old team, there's always going to be some extra something there that you really want to prove that they made a mistake. And for Niski as well, I think anytime Niski is playing some of these great mid laners, he is trying to prove that he belongs in the same conversation as the Bjergsens and the Jensens and those guys in the league. And so far, Niski has been great. And I know you guys have talked about this on the desk, and I was talking about this on the dive a while ago. And it's just like the fact that Cloud9 doesn't feel like, holy shit, where's Jensen? What happened to this team is a testament to how good Niski has been, right? Because they lost one of the biggest stars in the league as their mid laner, and everyone's like, yep, still Cloud9, still looks just as good as that team that got to the World Semifinals. Yep, pretty good team. And it's like, well, damn, their mid laner must be pretty good to be able to actually fill those shoes, because it really feels like he has.
Yeah, and they've done that with every position. It feels like when they go through turnover. It's insane that they have put out so many like, oh yeah, well, Impact's gone, but look, it's just here, and like, oh yeah, well,
Smoothie as well, right? Smoothie was considered the best support for a while.
Yeah, with Bunny Fufu, and we were talking about how it always feels like every time that they make a move, it feels like they have a backup plan ready to go, or like they do things slowly, where like they had Ray for a little bit, potentially going to replace Impact, and it didn't work out. And they had Bunny Fufu and Smoothie at the same time, and then they had Smoothie and Azael at the same time.
Blabber and Sven, Golden Glue and Jensen.
Yeah, it feels like they're always really prepared for anything to happen. So I don't know, but maybe that's why this fit in so well. Is because
I heard that they were definitely less prepared for this one to happen.
I'm sure.
By the way, so even if they have a history of farm leagues and building up another player, I think that this one was more reactionary, and
it's a good reaction.
It is, yeah.
They had Golden Glue in the back pocket, though.
That's true.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have been completely doomed.
Oh yeah, we were talking at the beginning season, like, are they gonna split time with Golden Glue, and just no whisper even.
That conversation didn't even like end; it just stopped, like mid sentence. Yeah, just trailed off.
So I have heard that they might be starting to swap some guys in and out. We'll see, because Blabber to me has been kind of conspicuously absent. Because he was great in summer. I feel like no one brings up Blabber because his international play was pretty bad. At Worlds, he was certainly outclassed by Zenskare, and they stopped using him. They went all with Sven. They had this great run, and then Blabber just kind of got erased from everyone's mind. But in summer, Blabber was strong, so will be interesting to see if he starts getting subbed in. But moving on, we got the Clump in the middle of the pack. Nobody wants to be in the Clump. And FlyQuest have their nose in
I'd rather
front.
be in the Clump than be below the Clump.
The Clump has been rising. It's been floating.
By the Clump, by the way, as I was referring to the CLG Echo Fox Golden Guardians Optic Gaming Clump that are 4 and 6 here.
Well, I just think Clump is a hilarious word. I think James brought it up on the analyst desk, and I was like, "What is this? How's that? Why is that?"
It was like written in just randomly one day in the prompter, and we all laughed about it, and then we just stuck with calling it the Clump.
Because it brings to mind just a visual of just this dirty.
I just think it's a gross word, right?
Like just this thing floating in the river, like a clump of stuff.
It's definitely not a, so there's if I'm like, oh, Mark, there's a clump of something, that's not.
It's never a compliment.
Yeah.
That's a great clump of hair you got.
I don't have enough for a Clump, but
not you specifically.
Well, of those teams that consist of the Clump here, CLG, Echo Fox, Golden Guardians, Optic, who do you think has the highest chance of getting out of it? Because I think that's pretty interesting. At the very bottom is Clutch Gaming 100 Thieves that are 3 and 7, but above them, these 4 and 6 teams, it does feel like week to week, game to game, my opinions are shifting of, who's going to be the playoff team. Where is this cutoff actually going to be? It's going to cut right through the Clump.
That's true. Only some in the Clump will survive. I think that Golden Guardians, to me, out of the 4 and 6 teams, I think that they are the clear team that has been performing the best over the last couple of weeks. They're 4 and 2 in their last 3 weeks, with a loss to TL, and then the one really bad loss to, I want to say Clutch, where they did the Orin Yasuo bot lane and they got super slammed by Piglet. And definitely took, magic resist on the Yasuo, thinking it was going to be an easy lane. They played into Aurelia, Alistar, and Piglet was running actually double armor on the Aurelia and super slammed him in lane. That game felt like a bit of a step away from the rest. It felt more of a like, okay, well, you got slammed. The team didn't necessarily look bad as a whole. It's just one kind of lane looked really bad, and they bounced back the next day. So 4 and 2 in the last 6. Only losing to Liquid, and then that Yasuo game. I think Golden Guardians is the standout for me of all the 4 and 6 teams.
It's funny that you slip up there and say Optic, because I have a lot of, hope for this team. Them switching out, being able to put in Dardoch, being able to switch out the bottom lanes if they need. It feels like they do have a lot of pieces that can work really well together. Sometimes maybe it's even they have too many pieces, because I think that Meteos has also been quite good. So I guess week to week, it depends so much on, how their scrims go and, what they're practicing, patch to patch, who's going to be able to do better. But I feel like Optic also have a decent chance of getting out there.
They have a good early game, which is usually like a good sign, but it's still...
The communication is definitely risky on this team.
And it feels like it's potentially harder for them to solve than some of these other teams in the Clump, where like not only do they need to figure out their own communication, but they might be swapping rosters to do it, which will just like delay, I think, how long it takes to fix that problem. Whereas like CLG and Golden Guardians seem fine in the mid to late game. It's like, well, CLG needs to stop getting slammed in lane sometimes, but like if they clean that up, it feels easier to fix that, I think, than some of the problems Optic seems to be facing.
Yeah, I mean, the problems you're talking about, Meteos even said on stage, he was like, yeah, the Koreans are talking to each other in Korean during the late game, doing some shot calling, and he was like making a joke of like, I'm here, along for the ride or whatever. But the language barriers that you're talking about are more difficult than just the normal, these guys need to get on the same page for their shot calling and, have the same idea about how to play out the late game. So it does seem like they've got a pretty big problem to tackle in that area that's a bit more unique.
I found that interview thing very concerning, as much as he was making light of it. He's like, yeah, I'm just playing Nocturne, I just farm press R, or whatever he said. He just kind of made a joke out of it, as he's saying. But I think it's pretty concerning if they, in those intense games and in the ones that really matter, the rest of the team is not really knowing what they're talking about. Because even if it doesn't directly relate to you, it's still good to know what your teammates are planning on doing, so you can actually prepare and try to react accordingly. Whether it's okay, they want to make a play on bot side, well, maybe the jungle should be down there getting vision for them to do that, or whatever. So I do always think that can make it very, very difficult, especially in intense situations and team fights and these sorts of really high pressure situations where you have to instantly react.
If Crown has to talk to Arrow, and then Arrow has to talk to Big, and then Big like talks to the rest of the team or whatever,
Broken phone.
then it could be an issue. Has worked out almost 50% of the time for them.
Has it?
They're 4-6.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
if they had
guess.
won one more game, then
That's true.
That's true.
All right. Well,
3 of those wins are with Dardoch, so I don't know.
and we got the bottom feeders here. We got 100 Thieves and Clutch. They're not even in the clump. The clump is looking good to them.
the clump is actually looking down on them.
They are. That is a sad thing.
If you're below the clump, then things dangle off the
you get
clump and
dripped.
fall
There's
off.
like- drips
There's
from the bottom of
there's
the
stuff
clump.
slumping
Oh,
over
no.
you.
There's definitely a big spikes down there. But
Now that we have painted a beautiful picture here,
100 Thieves and Clutch. 100 Thieves.
they play each other.
Yeah. And I think people are really shocked at how bad 100 Thieves looks. For a while, I think it was, at the start, it was okay. Well, they had a really tough schedule. And then it was like, okay, well, Bang's really good. They just need to play around him. There's clearly the pieces are still really good. It'll all work. We're 10 games in. They're 3-7. This was a team that was built with the idea of being a top team, right? They added Bang. They changed out their mid. And it was supposed to be, more success than what they had before. They're looking like, this makes sense for them to be 3-7.
Is this the most surprising result comparing preseason expectations to mid-split results?
Yes.
Because I bragged before about, we got the top 3 right, Team Liquid, C9, TSM. But then you know what number 4 was? It was 100 Thieves.
For all of us. I think I might have had 100
Well,
Thieves
yeah,
3
some
and
people
TSM
actually put
4,
them.
yeah.
Most people put them 3.
I know our aggregated was 4. I can't remember if I had them 3rd or 4th.
Yeah.
You had him 3rd.
There you go.
Chad had him 3rd too.
Yeah.
3rd.
So
Well, that's why he's gone.
he's been removed.
You dodged the bullet. It was one of you.
One of us had to go down for that. But it is super surprising because the name talent value alone, I think some of us are still holding out hope potentially.
You have stock in 100 Thieves right now, I think, still.
Yeah, I do. But
I did that last week.
it was a mistake. I didn't think they'd lose to Optic, but I think because they're only 1 game out of playoffs, there's still that feeling they can still rally a little bit, and the name value alone on that team feels so much stronger than some of the other teams in the clump or even Optic that they need to get through to get into playoffs. I still have a little bit of hope, but they are so much worse looking than I thought they would be.
I think it's certainly possible that they could still scrape their way into playoffs. That would not shock me, but unless this team completely turns around, I have no hope of this being a championship contender, right?
That dream's dead already, yeah.
Exactly. So I think that is pretty surprising to be feeling that strongly about this team, that all of us are, they're not going to compete for that, right? They look so outclassed by some of these teams. They have lost in a variety of different ways. They seem to have a lot of issues, and it is disappointing, I think, for 100 Thieves fans when they came into the league. They were so successful. They made it to finals their first split. Then they were, in playoffs again. They made it to Worlds, and it felt like, okay, sweet, we got this 2-time world champion. We upgraded our roster. Then this.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird the way it's happening because they're, the game will be going along and be like, oh yeah, you know what? It's going to happen. Now is the time where they make the resurgence. Someday he's doing so well in lane or whatever, getting kills all over the place. And then it comes down to some head scratcher mistakes where you're just like, wait, what happened to the, coordination through the mid game? That is what got these guys to such a successful start last year.
Yeah.
It's kind of not there anymore.
It's weird because I don't know what this team's even trying to do. We were talking about Golden Guardians and scaling, and Frogging does this and CLG does that, and I don't know what 100 Thieves does. What's their game plan? What's their play style? Their identity? Because previously it was we go mid to late game, we have good shot calling. Here we go, and we have a good AD, and we kind of spoon feed bot lane kills while somebody's on an island type stuff, and none of that works right now. I literally don't know what they're supposed to do to improve.
So it's really interesting because this is something that I talked about a while ago on the dive a couple weeks ago, and I feel pretty strongly about it now. Is that 100 Thieves, I think, was the team that was most negatively impacted by game changes. So when you talk about the ability for a team to close out when they are ahead, almost everyone is agreeing that has increased. The speed of the game has increased. Early game deficits mean more, and it's harder to come back. And 100 Thieves when you look at last year, I think so much of their success, you talk about late game shot calling and team fighting, but they played many of their games from a deficit, right? They'd get behind and then they'd hold on, then they'd win that one team fight. And now Cody-san has 5 items and you lost, right? And it doesn't feel like they ever get there. And it feels like they're almost trying to play that same style, but the games are getting closed out on them before they're actually able to reach that. So I don't know if this is just something where it needs to be a paradigm shift and probably needs to kind of redirect their efforts in a different way, but it does feel to me that they are trying to play for the same style that they played last year, and that style is just objectively harder to do. You can't just take these hits as much in the early game and take these hits in the mid game as much and expect to get to that super late game stage.
I think they're caught in the middle ground, actually, because some of the content 100 Thieves have put out have said, like, yeah, like we think the game should be played quicker and more towards early game. And then you have the Jace Olaf game where that is how you play, or, you know, that's the draft that you go for if you're trying to, you know, snowball.
That was tragic.
And then they lose so much momentum with, you know, these tower dives mistakes and stuff like that, that maybe they are trying to transition and the transition is just costing them, right?
I mean, like that Optic game they lost, they had like, what was it, a 4,000-ish gold lead and they got the Baron and it's like game's over and they throw that one away. It's like, well, you were ahead.
Yeah.
And if like Huki Afro was supposed to be like great at shot calling and all this stuff, like they just picked a fight and died it after, sure, whatever. But the game was still even from that point on. And they got out macroed by Optic with these communication issues and they kept getting picked off in side lanes from like an even game. So like I don't know what they're good at anymore because they can't play carries in the top lane like we were just saying. Their mid to late game doesn't look better than anyone necessarily, and they don't have very proactive early game.
Yeah, I think they may just be halfway through a transition. So
yeah,
we'll see if they commit one way or another. Because at some point, maybe you just cut it off and you're like, all right, we're not going through with the transition, right? We're trying to go back to the other side, or you make the push through and say we're gonna keep on practicing this until it works, you know, or we come out the other side.
And it feels like this Saturday may be a turning point for both Clutch and 100 Thieves. It feels like this is a must-win. That's the other team. Whoever loses is in sole possession of last place. Whoever wins, you know, moves up one win, and you know, it's going to be tied with some of those teams that are in that kind of playoff clump, you know, down at the bottom of that end. So 100 Thieves, I think feels like a bit of a must-win for them. They're going up against Clutch, who at least has publicly said that they have kind of identified the style that they want to play, where Piglet, you know, after his Aurelia win over Golden Guardians, he said, yeah, I have lots of champions that I want to play of this style. That's kind of the thing that they want to do. Huni had spoken about how Piglet playing aggressively and doing well down there on the Aurelia allowed him to have a good game on the Castio. So we'll see if Clutch is able to actually make anything come from that.
Team flex pick.
Yeah.
It sounds good. When they're like, oh, we have Huni in the top lane, Piglet wants to play anything. They want to have a lot of pushing lanes and get winning matchups through flex picks. But as we can see, that they aren't able to do that even in draft every game, right? Because then the next game they just fell on their face. So
yeah, it's one of those things. It's like it looks great when Aurelia Cassio, like the Cassio doesn't get ganked because your bot lane was winning on its own because the enemy support killed himself. Like that looks great, but then there's the other games where it's like, well, now every lane wants their jungler and they're all volatile lanes, and then one goes bad and the game's over. So like, we'll see. I think it's a really difficult way to play the game. Three winning lanes off flex picks. Like if that was easy to do, then like everyone would do it.
You have to have really strong laners, I think, to be able to pull it off. You have to be Griffin-esque almost, where it's, okay, yeah, we're all going to play aggressive, because to punish matchups, when you pick a counter matchup, you have to play often in their face. You have to be trading. You have to be, if you're playing Jace, you have to be poking them under their turret, which is always exposing you to the jungler. And you have to be confident that anytime one of your lanes is getting punished by the enemy jungler, your jungler is either getting enough back or your other two lanes are punishing their lanes hard enough that it makes up for it, right? Yeah. Which requires really, really good laners and very few mistakes, because if one lane gets punished by a jungler, the other laners cannot afford to ever make their own mistake and get punished in a 2v2 or a 1v1 or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it needs more coordination than like a more standard draft, because like, oh, well, our Scion didn't get help when he probably should have got it, but like, whatever. He's Scion, but like my Cassio didn't get help when he needed help.
My Jace is losing early to the Malphite.
Yeah, like okay, game's over.
Get me out.
Yeah, so I think those kind of like selfish sounding drafts actually require way more coordination to pull off.
Definitely agree. All right, we got some Twitter questions here coming in. First one is from Nick Carabius at Carabius. Sorry if I said your name wrong. He asks, which champions do you love thematically that isn't currently viable in the pro scene, and what would you change to make them viable? Example, Vigar mid, not support, which is played. It seems like it's okay with a bit more
It's
base.
Vagar. I lived with him.
Okay.
He was my roommate.
With the champion or
Yes.
the
Vigar.
Yeah.
I would say Vi. I have always loved this champion ever since it came out. It was the first champion I got Masters on, the first season that Masters was available. It just feels so good to hit a Q and punch people with that champion. The audio feedback from it, like they even improved the auto attack reset with her E. So my answer is almost always to this question, Vi. I wish that champion was in the game. Plus, it also promotes dive compositions and assassins being played in tandem with Vi because of the ultimate locking down a priority target and getting that kill. So that's 100%. I wish that was a pro play.
Probably Renekton for me. Just like it's not a very good answer. I just used to play Renekton.
I was gonna say I used to
play Renekton and Vlad in like season 2 or 3 or something. And I love playing them. And it's been a while since he's been in the meta. I think
he's getting played in Korea actually.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. I'm just
Seems like with the new Conqueror, your W counts as multiple auto attacks.
Right,
you can stack your W up very quickly, especially if you have Empowered. That's 3.
He had 9 games in 9.3, but maybe it wasn't even Korea. Yeah, so never mind. It's actually mostly in other regions.
Yeah. So I just like watching him play. I always think it's fun when someone gets Renekton because it's like this meatball is probably gonna get left on an island, like, and then he's an early game champion, and you have to see if he can snowball to be effective. Otherwise, he just becomes like a kind of crappy frontliner. So like I think he kind of makes the game interesting. I know he's not necessarily the most fun to watch.
I think it's cool when he gets old Essence Reaver.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was really fun because he could have the stuns popping off.
And he could do that with Spear Sojourn as well. So for me, as far as the thematic thing, I actually really just like Kindred a lot. And I think I would love to see Kindred back in pro as far as what I would change to make them viable. I just think Kindred has too much reliance on the marks, and the marks are not easily obtainable against.
We had it last weekend.
Team. That's true, but I mean, we're not seeing a lot of Kindred, right? That's for me something that I always find fun when it isn't in the meta a lot. I really do think the biggest thing is just your reliance on marks and the RNG around marks, and then how hard it is to get the ones past the scuttle. Even like the difference in how powerful you are in a Kindred game, where you go to scuttle, mark spawns on that scuttle, then the next one spawns, like where you're just getting good RNG, and you're winning on that side of the map, and you can just randomly run in and get all those marks, is so different. And in pro play, people are pretty easily able to react and play around that. So I think it becomes very difficult to actually make Kindred work outside of the more kind of utility style. All right, we got one more question here from Caleb Cummings. He says, I will continue to ask the same question. What new rivalry events in game would you guys like to see? Why are there not more of these? Rival missed out on a perfect chance with Silas / any Demacian.
I like the Silas versus a Demacian thing because that was his whole theme, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was, put in jail. He's against all the mages, or he's a mage and he's trying to fight back for the mages.
Is that what it is? I gotta say.
Lost.
Okay, so here's what it was.
I know he was the King Slayer, so he was in a cage and then he broke out of the cage and he's real mad. That's what I know.
My understanding, and this might be our own segment where from our spotty takes on like fringe lore, we put together our own stories. But my understanding was that his story turned a different look at Demacia because they were supposed to be like this pristine, everybody's righteous and noble and all that. And he's actually a mage, and it's from the mage's point of view. All the Demacians like hate magic and all that. And so they really oppress the mages. They put him in jail. That's why he has all the shackles. And so he's trying to get revenge for the mages. Like he broke out and he's trying to like lead the revolution for mages versus Demacia. And it turned to like showed the uglier
dark side of
Demacia.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know that many other. What other rivalries are there?
I mean, it could be anything, right? If there's any rivalries.
We had a Kha'Zix versus Rengar, and we had to check with stats if the effect happened. It doesn't. Pro play. the hunt is on. Yeah. Whatever it is.
The game has to go so long for that.
Yeah. There's also the Lysandra Ashe Sejuani whole thing. They have that quest.
Where's the Watchers? Give me like that's the thing that's been teased for like what feels like 5 years. The Watchers.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You don't know what a Watcher is?
No.
Do you know what a Watcher is? Can you explain it to us?
So they're like one of the main evil people in the lore of the game.
Is Vel'Koz one? He tries to absorb knowledge.
He's not
and
quite
stuff,
a watcher. He's weird. He's like what a watcher.
Big eyeball. How's he not a watcher?
He's like what a watcher should be. He might be a watcher now. I forget. But when he came out, he wasn't because he's from the Void and he's like a tentacle guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a watcher was like the people who like empowered Lysandra to do all the evil stuff in the Freljord or something. She's like the Watchers are coming. Remember, she has like all these lines about the Watchers. And then there was the Rise cinematic that came out where he was like collecting all the runes of power.
Oh, yeah.
And there was like the weird tentacle thing he fought, and everyone thought it was Vel'Koz, but it was a Watcher.
I never understood what Rise with all his.
Yeah, I don't know the lore very well at all.
I don't either. I just know the term Watchers have been around forever, and I want a Watcher.
I want to see how they're Star Guardians, right? Where's the anti-Star Guardians? Where's the evil people?
Oh, what are they?
I want the
again?
You want the Rowdy
exactly.
Rough Boys instead of the Powerpuff Girls?
Yeah, I want the evil squad, right? Who's here to like not be cute and just the exact opposite.
You just want everyone with an Urgot skin?
Yeah, I want all these just ugly ass champions with all these dark and brutal.
You want the
skins.
clumps.
Yeah, I want the clumps.
The clump champion.
Exactly.
So I had an idea for Ivern once where I wanted like demonic Ivern, where like instead
just
of Daisy
lighting
being
them on fire.
Yeah, instead of like freeing the animals, he like sacrifices them to the demons, and then Daisy's like this demon that he summons, and like
that actually sounds cool.
yeah, everything is just like this demonic evil.
Patchwork horror of all the jungle creatures.
Yeah.
Murdered.
Just put together, just
my
like bones and
gosh.
guts sticking out in all these weird angles. His shield is, I don't know, like he throws like intestines out,
Yeah.
like with his cue, like to wrap them up, like just something like really dark and graphic and horrible.
Yeah, I just think it would be fun. That stuff is. I mean, I don't think we're ever gonna have that because that's too brutal. But I do like the idea of the villainous skins, right? I think that it's fun to have the other side where you can have the whole squad of Star Guardian fighting against the whole squad of these evil villains.
I feel like you have to sign a waiver to even play in the game where someone is using.
We have
Mark
Meat
skin.
Grinder Urgot. It's not that much worse.
This is killing animals.
Killing the animals and then throwing intestines.
We already kill animals.
We actually kill them for gold.
Yeah, we kill them we harvest them, and where's the gold even come from?
Yeah.
Then they go to a happier place and we get money. So it's a great deal.
And they spawn back and we kill them again.
This fraud, this conspiracy.
And all this monster can think about is how little experience they give them.
They don't spawn back. They're just coming back to give us more money. They're like, hey, found you some more gold. See ya. I'll go get more.
It's actually like, don't they all have animations now for spawning. They like pop out of the ground.
Yeah, they're like, yay!
You're just killing these like newborns. They just pop out of the walls and they're like, oh, I'm alive. And then poof, you kill them again and spawn.
It's really dark
I
when
think
you
you're
think about it.
liberating them from Summoner's Rift. Summoner's Rift is
okay.
actually like a prison where, you know, all the champions are.
It's still dark. You're trying to put an uplifting spin. It's like, no, they're just trapped here.
The minions have a pretty bad life too.
Yeah.
The League is dark game if you think about it.
Put some pretty colors on it, dude. Don't worry.
Get us out of here, Kobe.
I'm a jungler. I've always had to turn my brain off and just do the PvE. I think that is going to be a great spot to end us for our episode. Thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Thank you.
You guys can definitely tune into the LCS countdown. Starts on Saturday at 1:30 as usual. Continue to send your dive questions using hashtag the dive lol to @Azael or @Kobe. Right, Azael? Right, Kobe?
That's true.
And that is going to be the end of our MarkZ episode. Thank you for joining us, Mark. We will invite you back in the future. We'll have to discuss how long it's going to be, though, how long of a break we need.
Only if you're good.
It's up to the comment section, though. Let's get 20,000 likes on this YouTube video, and I'll come back.
Fair enough.